My brother Zach, how you doing,
What's up,
bro?
big man? What's going on, brother? Man, I saw that little snippet you did a minute ago. I'm like, oh, he's in a suit. Let me go get like a shirt, put some pants on real quick. I got to get right for this. Well,
No,
looking
no,
sharp over there, brother.
thank you. I appreciate it, bro. But I thought of that as well, it's because honestly, it just my day dictates like what I wear with the
Yep.
meetings I have. So I have a bunch of meetings after this, so I had to kind of get dressed accordingly. But I'm glad that you're wearing a nice little shirt, bro. Looking all
You
sharp and
know,
whatnot.
you know, I need to go put my three-piece on so I can compete. I don't have the hair to fight with, so I got to do something right.
Bro, we got the same beard though. We're
Hey, that's
beard
what's
brothers.
important. Bearded and beautiful. That is the thing these days.
Yo, Zach, before we jump in, because I know that we could go on tangents. Like we legit had a podcast last week, if I'm not mistaken, on your
Hmm.
show, and we just hit it off. And that was the first time we met, and we just hit it off. And I'm like, yo, this
Yeah.
dude is my brother from another mother. We've just never met. So before doing that, let me actually introduce you to my crowd. Everybody's like, yo, hi, all, and all that stuff. Thank you guys for joining in. So Zach is a former police officer in the greater region of Atlanta. He was in the Army as well, in the U.S. Army, and now he's an entrepreneur with over six successful businesses, as well as being a podcaster with over 250, if I'm not mistaken, podcast interviews already recorded. And anybody that's in the podcast space knows that that's a lot in itself. So, my brother, thank you for being here. And I'm just going to introduce myself to your audience as well. My name is Christopher Dedeyan. I'm a professional speaker and a peak performance coach. So, my brother, let's just jump in right away.
Let's
And
do
I
it.
want to ask you the first question, man, which is how is it, first of all, living in Atlanta? I've never been. That's the first thing I
Mm.
really want to ask you because there's a lot of things that happen, like the culture side from Atlanta. I don't know if you're
Oh
into
yeah.
rap, but like I love like trap rap, like music and all that stuff. The rapping, there's a huge culture from there, from Atlanta, like basketball scene and all that stuff. I just want to know, bro, what is your favorite thing about being in Atlanta, and what is the
Mm.
thing that you don't like being in Atlanta?
Man, honestly, like one of the best parts of Atlanta is just the diversity, like you're talking about the culture. I mean, I just moved down to the Midtown area where, man, it's like you step outside and there's a whole different world everywhere, walking everywhere. I've always been in suburbs. So like now I can walk anywhere I want. It's just like a different world down here, man. But honestly, the worst thing, and some people might laugh about this, but if you know Atlanta, you know it's the darn truth. Our sports teams choking in the fourth quarter is literally the worst. I don't want to talk. If anybody brings up 28-3, I swear I'm logging off because I can't handle the Patriots. Man, I grew up. I was born in the '80s, so like the '90s, I'm like, oh, the Braves, we rock. And then all of a sudden, like the 20 teens hit, and it's like, all right, we can't finish a game, we can't win. The Super Bowl is here. Like, it could have been awesome. Forget it. Like, so that's by far the worst part of Atlanta.
Oh, I did not expect that you were going to mention that, but it's so funny that you did. And you brought up that infamous Brady run in the Super Bowl. Sorry, brother. I just had to
Oh,
kind
you
of
don't use that
re-
name. We don't use that B word in this circle. We can't because now he's in our division. Like, didn't he
on
go to
top of
Tampa
that.
Bay to like torture us more? Nah, we can't use that word in this circle. Sorry, man.
I love that so much. So you know what? I'll remember that next time I come to Atlanta. I just won't mention that person in itself, the famous
Oh,
GOAT football player. So yeah,
no,
100%.
no. Patrick Mahomes, the goat. Yeah,
Exactly,
I
Patrick
accept
Mahomes.
it. I'm done.
Exactly,
I'm
after
done.
one Super Bowl. Patrick Mahomes, he's the GOAT. Yeah, okay, bro.
Done. Done.
Brother, tell me what it's like or what it was like to be a police officer in Atlanta. Honestly, like there's a lot of things that like we hear, like I'm from Canada, as you know, a lot of things we hear, like there's some ups, some downs of being cops and all that stuff. And there's still a lot of prestige, in my opinion, of being a cop. But is that prestige still present in the United States? Is it something that's still predominantly there?
It's kind of interesting, man. I started back in late 2009, so this was like pre a lot of things that shifted the culture in law enforcement. And I ended up leaving in 2017, so I was there for a good little while. But I literally grew up in the spot where I played t-ball, right? So like I grew up with people I knew that now I'm the cop, and it's like nobody invites the cop to anything because he wants a cop at the party, right? What they didn't realize if I was there, that's how you get out of the stuff, right? Is I'm not the one crashing it. I'm already there. No, but it's one of those, man. It was a great experience. I did a lot of SWAT and narcotics stuff down here, a
No,
lot of gang
wow.
investigations because Atlanta is the hub for human trafficking across the world because of Hartsfield here. So I really had a passion towards human trafficking that I tried to dive into real heavily. But as everybody knows, man, 2014 through 2017, the culture towards law enforcement shifted, and it got difficult, man. It really did. And I saw that I wasn't making the impact that I joined for those reasons. I want to give back to my community, my neighborhood, literally the neighborhood I grew up in. And that culture shifted so hard. I just saw a lack of effectiveness there, which is actually what drove me to start that first business so I could kind of bridge that gap. But overall, man, that's what drove me out of it. But looking at the lessons learned, looking at the things I was able to accomplish, the lives I did impact in that small arena, it really was. I mean, it was different. It was different, and it taught me a lot of really great things, especially as a young man. I started at 21, so a 21-year-old with a badge is a scary thought, and a lot of maturing real quick happened.
Bro, first of all, there's so many things we're going to unpack there. Oliver just saying thank you for your service. So I 100% back that. And man, at 21 years old, getting that badge, and then you just said that little kind of thing in the beginning, and you kind of put it as a joke, but I didn't even know it's a true thing. Your friends kind of stopped calling you at parties because you're a cop, so there's that added pressure, super young. And then, like you said, then the whole aspect happened of like blue lives, all these like black lives, like all these things that are happening, and there's a lot of pressure on you, like you guys are a lot on scrutiny and all that stuff. So I definitely see that. And the fact that you were like, hey, you know what? I joined the police, which makes perfect sense. Like, my background is fireman, and a lot of times that anybody goes into like law enforcement. Yeah, exactly.
We got jokes there.
Hang on. We're going to start, bro. Fireman who gets caught.
Hang on.
So
it was going to come up. You knew
it was going to come up, bro. I tried to sneak it in, full professional, bro. But you did not let that slide.
Never.
You did not let that slide. So yeah, a little fair play over here, cops and police officers. Police officers and firemen here. But what I'm saying is that anybody goes into that like law enforcement or just service approach, that's the way they will be approaching it. Like as a young man, we're like, hey, we want to serve our community. And then you're seeing that service is not there as much. Do you still believe that there is a chance that this narrative could shift? And if so, what can we do to shift this narrative? Is it something that has to be done within the cops? Is it something that has to be educated with people? Is it the whole political education system that has to change for that narrative to switch and bring it back to like, you know what, these are great people here to serve?
I think in the time that I've left, I've been out 5 years now. That's when I joined the military. And I think the culture has shifted. But I think the realization needs to be, when you have a badge, when you have that much authority, that much power, same with the military, when you're a world power, you develop a sense of arrogance, right? We can't do anything wrong. This is how we've always done it. This is the old mantra. We've always done it this way. It's always worked for us. Why change it, right? Which is the wrong attitude as entrepreneurs. We know that now. That's a wrong attitude to have. And honestly, the part that was the most upsetting for me was the whole defund the police piece. Because at the end of the day, the issue is if from Atlanta to Baltimore to LA, all the police departments are different. They're all trained differently. They have different standards, SOPs, procedures. Everybody does things completely different. What it's going to take, in my opinion, and very humble opinion at that, but after researching different pieces of that, it's like the standardization of policing has to happen where everybody has to be trained the same. Everybody has to have similar SOPs. You have to shift it a little bit where you are, but like, the baseline should be there, just like state laws. There's a baseline there, federal laws, there's a baseline. But if you defund everything, you're never going to be able to shift that rhetoric because training takes money. Training takes time. It's going to take the personnel coming off the streets and into the classroom. And that education piece, cops need to be educated, no different than the public needs to be educated about what cops are dealing with, what cops are doing. So I think it's really defunding is the wrong answer, really more funding attached to let's get y'all trained properly and on the same playing field. So that way, when something in Baltimore happens, we can look at it and say, no, that is not how we were trained. That is not the way you're supposed to do things. And then you look at it in Atlanta. That's not how you do things, but we don't have that standardization. So it's hard to point a finger and say, no, you weren't trained that way, if that makes sense.
That makes perfect sense. And, I guess that's kind of the basis of just the United States in itself, right? It's all different states and they govern in a different way. And you're saying, hey, let's put certain standards that this is the baseline that everybody should be respecting, like as training cops that we're talking about over here. And then that's going to give a better education for everybody around. And like you said, educate the population as well of what they do. So that is really interesting. Thank you for sharing that. And Zach, tell us a bit like your journey, because you did Atlanta cops for a little while, and then you went into the Army. Now you're like an entrepreneur, like 6 companies and all that. How did this process happen? Why did you shift? Why did you leave from like this, safe, secure, let's call it, like, careers, and then you
Hmm.
got into where you're at. Talk to me about that journey.
Man, how much time we got?
I mean,
Um,
brother, listen, it's usually like 20, 30 minutes, but I just want to be respectful for your time. But please, bro, unpack it, go into it. I'm really intrigued.
Man, what ended up happening, and there's a book out there, Start with Why, Simon Cynic. If you haven't read it, highly recommend it. But I mean, it's one of those that it really shifted. I read it probably halfway through my policing career, and trying to find that piece and develop like, why am I still doing this? That journey, man, search for meaning attached to like what we do. There's so much that we have to start valuing about the things we do every single day. And as I read that book and I started realizing, why am I doing this still? And I couldn't figure out because again, I lost that piece of impact that I thought I was making. But I responded to an audible alarm, like the house alarm was going off, right? My partner and I showed up and it ends up being a burglary. Back doors kicked in. So we clear the house, everything's ransacked. Like you see in the movies, the TV's gone, laptop's gone, you see like everything turned over. And the unfortunate part about policing, a heavy aspect of it, serve and protect is the catchphrase, but realistically, it's respond and report. So to a burglar, you're not preventing a burglar, you're responding to a burglar and you're doing a report, filing the report, and your job's done. So what ended up happening, we had to call the homeowners. It was this young couple. They had just moved into the house within that last year. We called the homeowners there, and we literally had to stand there and have them inventory what's missing. We have to be able to put these things into. That's how you get them tracked through like pawn shops and whatnot, right? So they just had this terrible incident. Now we're like, all right, let's go down this checklist, and yeah. So what all's missing? And they're literally inventorying their lives is now gone. And as they're doing this, the young woman all of a sudden like sprints out to the bedroom and like goes all the way to the back of the house. I'm like, this can't be good. And she's like frantically searching around the bedroom. Well, her jewelry box had been dumped over. She starts looking through her jewelry box, and her grandmother had passed 2 weeks prior, and she was looking for this heirloom ring that her grandmother gave her. It was gone. And jewelry is not something you can trace. So there's like, I mean, it's gone, right? You can't
Yeah.
trace it. There's no serial number. There's no way to identify this was hers. But her grandmother having just passed, that was like the last piece of her grandmother that she had. And she looked up at me and she's like, how do we ever prevent this from happening again? How do we ever stop our friends, our family, our loved ones from ever being victimized like this? And she's like bawling in the middle of it. The problem in law enforcement that I wouldn't say the problem in law enforcement, one of the issues I was struggling with was liability is a huge aspect of these things, right? So if I answer, get this alarm system, get this lock, do this, this, and this, and any of that fails and they get burglarized again, I'm now liable. The city that I'm representing is now liable. The county, like, it goes all the way up the chain. A lawsuit in a litigious society that we're in, lawsuits are happening like that all the time. So the police department trains you. You don't give that recommendation. You just say, I'm sorry, I can't tell you exactly. Here are a few options, but I can't recommend anything. So that for a long time was like, it just chewed on me. So I left the law enforcement, went into the military, basic training, officer school. I was going through infantry school, and I had this idea. I'm like, how do I solve this problem? How do I bridge that gap where now I can give those recommendations? And what came out of it was my first business. It was Night Protection Services, still around, still an amazing organization where we go in and we do risk assessments, risk analysis, essentially a SWOT analysis. What are your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities for crime to occur, the threats that you're facing within your community, that then we package it together and like, here's the actual recommendation to protect yourself. So now that liability is absorbed by my company. So when a law enforcement can't be proactive necessarily, it's very reactive. My organization go out and now we're proactively saying, here's how you protect yourself. Here's the best lock on the market. Here's the best alarm system on the market. Oh, you don't know how to install it all? Cool, I've got you. And we'll actually go and put it all and implement everything we're recommending. So that shift into business ownership was more or less not I wouldn't say an accident, but it was one of those like, man, I know something needs to happen here. So there's a problem in the market. I started researching it. Nobody else was really doing things like that at that time. And I'm like, well, here's the opportunity. Let's roll with it. And it rolled for a good little while. I mean, it's a great organization. I absolutely love it. I mean, it's a passion piece, right? And my why that came from all of that is helping those that can't help themselves. A homeowner might not know how they can help themselves and stay safe. So like my organization will now help you because you can't help yourself stay safe. You might need a little bit more knowledge, a little bit more education, things that you're not aware that are available to you. And my organization helps bring that.
I love that, Zach. I love that because you mix two of your passions, and it's very entrepreneurial to see, hey, there's a problem here. why isn't it getting solved? And your passion of helping, and not only that, like you said, hey, cops is very reactive, which obviously, that's a service, but then what we could do to be proactive and setting this company in place and giving them an actual recommendation and putting that out there. Do you feel like, in a sense, you are fulfilling your need to serve others in a higher level on what you're doing there than what you were doing as a cop? And that might be a very tough question, and maybe it's not very, black and white either, but how would you speak to that?
It feeds back into why I left law enforcement. I left because I wasn't making that impact. And with that organization, I really feel like I am making that impact. And all I employ with that organization are off-duty police officers and
Let's go.
veterans. So I'm still tied into that realm where now they're working for me part-time. They get a little bit extra money. They're still passionate. They're able to make those recommendations that we all want to be able to make, but now they don't have to worry about
I love
the
that.
city getting sued. And so it kind of fed back into that cycle of not just being the answer. It's like we're a piece of the puzzle. Law enforcement's still needed, and we're bridging that gap to where now you don't have to worry about, oh, I have to call the cops right now. It's all right, I've done these steps to protect myself, my family's safe, so on and so forth. And then law enforcement may still need to be, but it's all part of the puzzle, right? Let's just put it all
I love
together for
that.
each other.
I love that, Zach. And here's one question I want to ask, because obviously, you went through the cop, you've been in the army, and now you're an entrepreneur with 6 companies. And it's kind of a story that's very similar to me if I think of Jocko Willink, if like I'm sure that or David
I might
Goggins,
know of him a little
you
bit.
might
Him
know of
too.
him,
Yeah,
exactly,
I might
him
know
too,
those
right?
two guys.
So
Yeah.
here's where I'm going with this. What are some of like the best things that you've learned within that structured, approach of being a cop, being in the army, that you're taking as a leader and you're implementing within your entrepreneurial life? And what are some of them that you could teach new entrepreneurs to be like, hey, you know what? If you do this as a leader, they respond like this. And you just mentioned you have some people under you as well. If you have 6 companies, I'm sure you have several colleagues, employees, and so on and so forth. So what would you speak to that?
A big piece of it, and I love those two guys, and they both have amazing books out there. So to even
Mm-hmm.
be compared in a conversation, you didn't compare, but I'm going to compare. I'm going to let you Jason ride.
I'll
We'll go
compare,
there.
bro. I'll compare. I'll give it
Um,
to you.
a big piece of it was realizing, and I joined the military because I wanted a test of leadership. I'm a Dale Carnegie guy. I taught at the Dale Carnegie Institute here in Atlanta. So I love those lessons. I love John Maxwell. And my leadership journey started in law enforcement, but continued into the military where I wanted to test that leadership. If you can say 2 words under fire, literally under gunfire, and people respond, that is leadership. That is influence to the highest degree, right?
Mm-hmm.
And careful what you ask for, as I went to Afghanistan with the infantry guys. So like careful what you ask for, but it was a great test. During that time, we ended up losing guys. And we were fighting an active war with Green Berets, with Special Forces, with the Afghan. People see what's happening in Afghanistan right now. Like this is a legitimate thing that's been happening for years. And during that, as we lost guys, the biggest thing I had to recognize was you do have an image you have to uphold. You're wearing a badge, you're wearing a uniform, you're a leader. There's a little bit of an image you have to uphold because people turn to you to see what you're doing, how you're responding, how you're reacting to things. But what you have to recognize is people want to be able to relate to you. You have to be relatable. You have to be fluid in what you're doing. All these things are needed. But to me, the one aspect that is needed the most is vulnerability. If you're not vulnerable as a leader, if you can't project, I am feeling sadness, I am feeling loss, I am feeling all these feelings I had when we lost those guys on an operation I planned. I had guilt, I had survivor's guilt, I had leader's guilt, I had all these things, but I was feeling them, which means I know my soldiers are feeling them because they were in the middle of the fight too. So if I can't show this is essentially it's the decompartmentalization of things. We're taught to compartmentalize. You pack it away, you continue the mission. Yeah, that's true, but you have to unpack all that baggage, or those become the skeletons in the closet, right? And if you don't unpack those things, as a leader, they look to you for that vulnerability. You have to show you're vulnerable enough to cry in front of your people sometimes. That's literally what happened in Afghanistan. I stood up and cried in front of my men, and we started processing these emotions so we could continue the fight. And that to me is like the biggest lesson I've learned is like you have to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to show your team exactly what you want from them. That lead by example piece isn't just I do this, this, and this. I get up at 4 a.m. every morning. Yeah, I do. That doesn't mean I expect it from my people. But if I can share my feelings, my emotions, show you that humanity, let you relate to me, now I can expect you to be vulnerable. I can expect you to be able to relate to your coworkers, your peers, the team, and then all of a sudden the culture within the organization shifts completely and everybody's relating to each other.
I Zach, I love that you mentioned that, and you could have, taken that in so many directions, the more obvious ones, like answer wise. But the fact that you mentioned vulnerability, bro, hats off to you because you're so spot on when you're saying that. I truly do believe that you want to be better leader, you have to be a better communicator. And it's not about like, hey, I'm the leader, so I'm perfect, so do it my no, bro, nobody is.
No,
So
not
if
at
you
all.
show that and you have that open dialogue, and I'm sure, like you said, you learn a lot that from like from being in the cop and army, there's a lot of debrief that happens and you have to be
Mhm.
vulnerable within that and understand, hey, what can we do to improve that? That is such an important lesson for entrepreneurs. So be vulnerable. It does not
Mhm.
show any weakness being vulnerable.
Exactly.
It's just you being at that moment and be like, hey, this is a situation, this is how I'm feeling, how can we better this, how can we do this as a team? So I love that you mentioned that. And
And to
Zach,
further what you said,
no, go
just
for it,
to
go
just
for
kind
it.
of like caveat off that a little bit, you talked about communication. Well, vulnerability and communication. I mean, if you have to be as, especially as a leader, if you say, "Hey, how can we improve this meeting?" One, you should be asking that question. Two, you have to be receptive enough to receive that feedback and not let your ego attack it. Like that's a vulnerability piece where allowing your subordinates, your team, your janitor in your office, who should be the biggest cheerleader, because if that janitor cleans that floor better than anybody else, and that's the first line appearance that you're going to get, the first impression you're giving is the janitor just, man, those floors are super shiny because that janitor loves what you're doing because you gave him the opportunity to tell you what needs to be fixed. That's a level of vulnerability that, again, it shifts who you are as a leader completely.
I love that. I love that. Spot on, brother. And bro, talk to me about your podcast because I do know that it's a solid like passion project for you. And like I said, you've done over
Absolutely.
250 like podcasts of that and the whole production behind it and so on and so forth. Talk to me about like what are the best lessons you've learned doing over 250 episodes, like from some of the guests, from your experience, all of that. Yeah, you took a big breath, so I'm gonna let you go for that. Yo, you have something to say. Let's go.
Man, so the show started as Tactical Leadership, as the Tactical Leadership podcast, and I've since shifted it to the Tactical Leader, where I've branded myself as the Tactical Leader, because not because I'm the Tactical Leader, but because I'm all about the tactics attached to leadership, right? So it becomes the tactics that I want to project, and I bring people like yourself on that come on, and they're leaders in their industry, and we dissect what are the tactics for you to actually succeed, build culture, do this, that, and the other in whatever you want to work at. If you're an entrepreneur, awesome. If you're an employee, awesome. You're still a leader in your capacity, wherever that may be. And the biggest thing I learned is that my podcast turned into therapy sessions. I would bring people. Originally, it started as marketing. It was like, this is how I'm going to grow my business. It worked. The security firm, it was great for the security firm where I used it as the sponsor of the show. You heard the production company is now the sponsor of the show, where it's like, it's a great funnel for business. It's amazing. But what it ended up turning into is I went through things and I started unpacking my own issues, getting the skeletons out of the closet, confronting those, sitting with myself. And I realized I started shifting towards people that the Jockos, the Davids, that they've dealt with this, they've unpacked it, or they are still unpacking it. So it started becoming therapy sessions for me. If I can talk about my issues with a thought leader, with a therapist, I've had therapists on, I've had divorce coaches on, I've had all these people that the things that the Army deals with, the police department deals with, like if I can talk about these in a vulnerable way because I've lived them and I want to be able to unpack my own stuff, that's what it turned into. It's not that there's like one lesson I can point to, like this is it. It's like
Mhm.
each week it's somebody like you, like we have an interview. Let me find out all about you. Well, I'm asking you questions that I want to know for my own stuff.
Mhm.
I'll censor myself. And then my Wednesday episodes are those self-application pieces. This is where I applied it. This is where I've dealt with it. This is where I'm going to apply it because I've loved this piece of it. And then we go into the tactics part where you share your tactics. I'm like, I'm learning, man. Like that's the best part of a podcast. It's a journey of learning and education for myself, and if I'm fascinated by it, I'm hoping the audience is also fascinated by it.
Zach, I love that approach. And let me just like throw some flowers at you here. But this is truly me being honest. And I mentioned this when we had our interview. I love the way that you approach your podcast and you broke it down exactly in three parts. So you have that one person doing an interview and just chatting it out. And then from there, you're like, hey, you have that tactical part and what you learn and you're separated makes it so much better to consume, understand, and digest for the audience. And I love the fact that you're approaching it. Hey, this is a great way for me to learn, for me to be vulnerable, for me to be empathetic and so on and so forth, and just connect with amazing people. So I love that. And one last thing before we go into kind of the end of the conversation here, talk to us about like what are some of the businesses that you're running? What are the ones that are like that surprised you the most when you started? What are some that maybe failed? What are some difficult things as an entrepreneur that you felt in the beginning? Kind of open-ended question here.
Yeah.
You could kind of run with it how you want, but talk to us about that. Like, as I said, you have 6 businesses and that doesn't happen by mistake. You know what you're doing.
Well, if we want to talk vulnerability, I might as well be vulnerable, right?
Let's go.
Man, so the first three I started was the security firm, a domestic violence awareness nonprofit where we teach women self-defense. That's our primary program. And then a real estate holdings firm where the goal was to buy small apartment complexes and house
Mm-hmm.
women going through. And then the security firm was going to provide the security, like this whole central force of like, we're now making impact. Then COVID happened. We had a 30 door we we're going to close in February of 2020. March 2020, guess what happened? And those three organizations will group self-defense classes, security for organizations that are no longer housing. We actually focused on churches and schools. Well, now people aren't going to church, people aren't going to schools because of COVID. So those three organizations are pretty much backburnered right now. They're semi-profitable, but at the end of the day, they're not what they were.
Mm-hmm.
They're still around and we're still building them, but those are like kind of like, hey, we got to wait for COVID round 2 to be done with. And in COVID, I shifted from the podcast. I started to realize like the operational mind I've been given through all my experience, all this production stuff, I can do it better. I'm paying a lot of money for people to produce these episodes. It's inefficient. And I wanted to create a way, just like the format of my show, like how can I efficiently dissect this in my mind to make this time efficient, financially efficient. So the podcast became the production company, which became Be a Tactical Leader. That's the coaching brand where I do business coaching, podcast coaching. We really specialize in helping our clients realize their vision and taking the actionable, the tactical steps towards achieving that vision. And that's where we've really flourished. And the two surprising ones that I don't know we talked about are I have an international dance competition that's in 151 countries.
What?
150, yeah.
What's that? What is that?
Countries. Yeah, man. Nobody expects this one, man.
That was a curveball, bro. Like, I mean, you dance or?
No, well, I mean, I two-step and a finger wag and all day wait for those TikTok episodes. But no, man, it comes back to vulnerability. I was in a mastermind and my business partner in the dance competition, he used to dance with Justin Timberlake, Pepsi commercials. He was in Step Up. Like, he did these amazing things. Well, COVID hit and he lost his sales consulting firm. Hollywood screwed him over a decade ago. He's like, I want to get back into my passion, my purpose. And we masterminded, we merged together. He's the face. He's the Ryan Seacrest pretty boy. I'm the operations, the COO side of it, where together we grew and started impacting 151 countries with, wow. We took the domestic violence awareness nonprofit and matched it as the purpose partner. So we're taking domestic violence awareness across 151 countries in the world in the first 8 months. And then we have a talent development firm that we started over the top of that. So as these people come on the show across all these countries where they're recorded on their cell phone, so the production company polishes all this up, makes it look pretty, sends it off with the talent development firm. Well, in week 3, we had Angelo from South Africa come on the show. By week 6, we had him signed to Universal. And then through the revenue surge he had from all of that, he started 2 of his own dance studios in South Africa. The impact across the world, when you start talking about global impact, and I'm big on legacy, like you start talking about the legacy pieces, you start putting these pieces together, like I want to help people that can't help themselves. It goes back to my why. Well, all these organizations feed off of helping people that can't help themselves because they don't have the education, the know-how, the capabilities, and all these organizations feed off of that, and that's what's made them successful.
Zack, I swear to God, you know this, but I mean, we could talk until tomorrow morning because there's so many things that you said here, bro. And I just want to highlight one main thing, and I really hope that the listeners and the viewers afterwards will kind of allude to this and really realize this. Everything that you're doing as an entrepreneur is value-driven. What can I bring massive value? And then the impact and the income will follow. If you're looking at entrepreneurship just on the income level, you could succeed, but you won't succeed at a very high level and you won't change lives. The previous thing that you mentioned from like, hey, I want to buy properties, you could just do real estate investing and all that. But like, hey, I want to buy properties for people that don't have a chance to live in that property, link it up with the church. I mean, that ideology, bro, that is amazing. I commend you for that. And God willing, soon enough, when all this COVID situation opens up, you'll be able to kind of get that back on play.
Oh,
and
it'll happen. It'll happen.
For sure. I don't even doubt it, bro.
It's going to happen.
There's like, I mean, at this point, I'm a fan, so I'm going to be following you. I'm going to keep you accountable. I'm going to check all that stuff, bro. 100%. And the dancing, the same thing. So my brother, like I said, just to be respectful for your time here, the last question I have is, where's the best place that we can reach you, that people want to connect with you? Where would that be? How could people connect with you?
The two best spots across all social media, I'm Zack A Knight, and then also Be a Tactical Leader. So those are my two handles that I monitor both, the coaching brand, the personal brand. Reach out, find me. I'd love to continue this conversation with anybody that's open to it, and anybody that
Let's
needs
go.
help but can't do something. Like, let's make this happen.
Let's go. And everything that you mentioned will be in the description as well. And one last thing I want to ask you, Zack, is there anything that I could do to support you more, bro?
Oh man, keep up the laughs and the jokes, and then let me make more fun of you for being a firefighter. Next time, like beers and bourbon or something like that, we'll have
Let's
to do
go.
an evening commercial, and we'll make this happen, brother.
I love that, bro. It would be a true pleasure. And same thing for you, bro. Keep on doing your amazing work. And Zack, once again, thank you for blessing us with your time, and thank you for your service and everything that you're doing. And there's a lot of people saying, Zack, you're amazing with value and all that stuff. He really is.
I paid her to say that one.
You paid her, you know her. I love that. All right, my brother. So that being said, thank you for being on the show, and we will be speaking very soon.
Love it, brother. Thank you.
All right. Have a good one.